stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. My book, based on this podcast, is designed to help walk you through a similar process as my podcast guest experience, to help you identify specific points in your life that can become some of your best stories to share. The stories you share matter. They color your memories and your self-confidence. They help create your internal messages, and they impact the perceptions of the people around you. This book will help you uncover those stories that continue to shape your internal perceptions and your relationships. The pre-order campaign, similar to a Kickstarter campaign but for books, was extended by a few days because I was so close to reaching my goal of 250 books pre-ordered. To get your copy and to take advantage of the early investor bonuses included, visit my website, elkinsconsulting.com, and click on the Pre-Order My Book button. I sincerely appreciate your support. Panting, stopping to breathe and get my heart rate back to a reasonable pace, I looked up ahead to more steep climbing up the mountain. Then I looked down at the path I had just hiked up, and I smiled. It was a rigorous hike, and I had not planned to take such a hard trail to the summit this time. The dog needed water, so I stopped in a shady spot just off the trail to fill his bowl and let him rehydrate. It's nice to have the dog around as an excuse to stop and catch my breath again. With his heavy fur coat, he's even less comfortable than I am on this nearly 80-degree day before noon. But he's just as happy as I am to be outside on our mountain. Taking one last look back, I started up another steep climb, knowing I wasn't far from the summit. As I listened to the randomly shuffled song that came through my headphones, I had to stop again to look up and down from the middle of the steep climb. Glory, glory, hallelujah. The sun is shining, shining down. Glory, glory, hallelujah. I'm alive and I'm feeling fine. Hearing those words sung by J.J. Gray in his song, The Sun is Shining Down, I started thinking about what compelled me to take this hard route to the top of the mountain. My top strengths, according to the Gallup assessment, don't include achiever or competition, two of the themes I could imagine would drive someone to do what I was doing. So what was it? It was that moment I realized it was character, and character has little to do with any assessment results. I realized I use my strengths to develop my character and not the other way around. It had been a tough morning, which is why I knew I needed to hike. Getting outside always helps me clear my head and make sense of things. The email I received was cruel and unprofessional, a response to what I considered reasonable requests for information. And the words from that message clouded my vision as I walked up the mountain, feeling attacked, defensive, angry, and self-conscious. Had I failed in the assignment? Was it my work that triggered this unprofessional response? I felt my confidence start to slip back down the mountain behind me. Pushing myself harder, pressing my feet as solidly into the slippery, rocky trail as I could, I ascended another steep 15 or 20 feet of that mountain. And I felt nothing but exhilaration and pride as I took a step onto the rocks at the summit. Looking down, I could imagine myself when I was partway up the mountain, panting, pushing, and clearing that frustration and anxiety out of my way. Now that I was at the top and looking back down, the path still looked crazy hard, but the feelings of inadequacy at the midpoint were no longer with me. It was the next day, as I was telling a friend about my inspiration on the mountain, that I realized I had missed a big part of my own lesson. I told her the story with my optimistic nature showing in full force, using the words that popped into my head as I sweated and panted up the steepest part of the mountain. Persistence, resilience, grit. Shame, feelings of inadequacy, self-punishment. Damn. As she added those words and phrases, I realized she was right. I didn't take that hard route simply because I was demonstrating resilience and grit. I was punishing myself for what I thought I had done wrong. I was pushing away the shame I felt as I remembered the words in the email. And I was proving to myself that I was resilient and strong. Even if I failed at one thing, I would be damn sure not to fail at this. Our conversation shifted from why we punish ourselves to why it mattered. After all, pushing myself by climbing up a mountain had to be one of the healthiest and constructive ways to do that. But knowing why I was pushing myself so hard mattered. If I was working away those feelings, those frustrations, giving those feelings a name helped me address them specifically, rather than just blowing off arbitrary steam. When we know the why behind our actions, we can be more intentional about not only processing our feelings behind those actions, we can open our minds to learn the necessary lessons that experience can teach us. I shared the story of my hike with my friend so I could talk through thoughts I knew could contribute to life lessons, to apply my thoughts to actual improvement for future similar situations. When I tell a story like this to a friend, I actually create an arbitrary constraint around the experience. I created a box for the story to fit into based on my prior experiences. That means I looked for what I wanted to see. I set limits for understanding the context of the story, and I missed all kinds of potential for lessons and growth. But by sharing the story with the right friend, she asked the questions I needed to ask myself, the harder questions. And that conversation removed some of those constraints. In the book, The Art of Possibility, a gift I recently received from my friend Jeff Eichler, the very first chapter is about exactly that. Based on past experiences, we make assumptions that create a box or constraint for ourselves. I made assumptions based on my optimistic nature, assumptions about the reasons behind my lessons that I was meant to learn from the experience, assumptions behind the reasons for the negative email I had received. And not all of those assumptions were bad things necessarily, but without some opportunity to question them and work through that story I was telling myself, I may have limited my potential for personal growth. Who do you have in your life that helps you work through this kind of internal message? Which of your friends or acquaintances can you count on to help you ask yourself the tough questions and get the most out of an experience? Who do you have in your life that helps you work through this kind of internal message? Which of your friends or acquaintances can you count on to help you ask yourself the tough questions and get the most out of an experience? If you can't think of anyone right away, be intentional about building relationships with the people who can help you process your thoughts and experiences. People you can trust, people you can be vulnerable with, and people who will add positive support and encouragement. Self-reflection is a great start for self-improvement, but if you're not expanding that reflection by sharing it with people you trust, you're limiting your opportunities to apply that self-reflection, to deepen it, and to improve your communication and relationships as a result. Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.
Listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going away?